And I think most of y'all have a general idea of who I am, so I'm not going to spend like 15 minutes trying to introduce myself. But if you weren't already aware of the fact, I am a redneck from Mississippi. I grew up in the woods, and I spent 17 years, technically 18 years, within the military and law enforcement communities, both with the Marine Corps and with the Coast Guard. So I have a very diverse background of being a mechanic and being trained in combat. I've been through every type of firearms course, tactical driving, combat first aid. So when I talk about stuff like security for home or being out in town, it's not something that, like, actually, when I put this together for the first self-reliance weekend, it was something I actually had to stop and go back to square one, because I just do this in my head. Like, I can walk in and I know access points and where people are going to come from and how I would do stuff. It's not something that I mentally think about. It's just second nature for me. So I had to kind of take a step back and be like, okay, if I didn't know anything, how would I approach this? And so the first thing I like to start off with is a question. What do you think about when I say home security? Somebody throw something out.
Little cameras everywhere.
Alarm system? What?
12
Little cameras.
Little cameras.
Keeping the bears out of my windows.
There's what?
Keeping the bears out of my windows.
Keeping the bears out of the windows. Okay.
Alarm system.
So we got alarms and security cameras.
Defensible space.
Defensible space. That's actually where we're going to kind of go with this one. But a lot of times when I do this, I will get, guns, because everybody's going to go to guns and security system and cameras. Camera's actually not going to do you much good until after the fact. So what is that really doing for my defensive posture? And like so many other things in life, a lot of it comes down to a mindset. Whether we're talking about security, making money, growing food, it's a mindset thing. Most people are a consumer mindset. So if I want to talk about security, I need to go buy the thing that's going to do the security, and we don't think about everything else. So a lot of people, especially the guys that are like, well, if somebody breaks into my house, I'm going to shoot them in the face with my 12 gauge, and then I'm going to throw them in the pig pasture. Okay, dude, that's like saying that your plan for a fire is to put it out with the fire extinguisher and leave your kitchen charred. Like, why don't we stop the fire from happening? So my first goal isn't to make my property something that looks like something that nobody wants to touch. My first goal is concealment. I don't want anybody to know that my property is there and that there's anything of value. So I always go with concealment, deterrent, and then controlling access. So everybody's going to vary, because how many people do we have that are on a property like this where it's remote? So a couple. How many of y'all are in a decent sized town? Like you've got a Walmart and a Target. So a couple, and we've got a couple of people I know that are in a major metropolitan area. So obviously, what works for me might not necessarily work for you, which is why I say it's a mindset thing. But for me out here, one of the things that we'll deal with a lot is people breaking into barns, because barns are usually not attached to your house. They might not be close to your house. And if you're farming or ranching, where do you put all of your tools? In the barn. So people break into barns because that's where the valuable tools are. And at nighttime, there's probably not going to be anybody chilling in the barn. Like, I mean, I do know a couple of rednecks that'll sit out in the barn and drink beer at night, but they're kind of the rarities. So that's something that I think about here. So just coming at it from my aspect here, when I start with concealment, my first thing is if I go put up a really cool, high-fangled 10-foot fence with Constantino wire across the top and signs that say that it's electrified and so forth and so on, what does that tell you about that property?
That's something valuable.
They really don't want somebody there.
I don't know what's in there, but it's fucking important. So it's kind of hard to tell looking at Nicole's property right now because we're working on redoing a lot of the fencing. But it used to be about a year ago, if you drove down this road and you looked to the left, you wouldn't see a fence because it was completely overgrown with vines and bushes and saplings and just green material. So when you see a fence like that, your first thought is, well, it's abandoned. They're not, even if you can actually see the fence, they're not using it. They're not trying to keep anything out. They're not trying to keep anything in. So if I'm driving around to do something nefarious, then I'm going to look at that and be like, it's probably not worth my time. So then we get into deterrence. So if you look at Nicole's property, if you go to where we're at, the far side of the driveway, you've got a fence, and then you have a pond. And whether or not you want to think it or not, because that water looks really clear, that pond's actually about this deep. I know because I've been in it. Chasing ducks out of a pond in the middle of winter is not fun. But then you have a steep rocky hill, and then you have another fence. Now, if you come on this side of her driveway, you have a fence with a hill, and then a flat spot, and then an electrified fence for the pig pasture, and then two really big pigs, a lot of mud, and then another fence, and then a couple of beehives, and then a bunch of bushes. So when you walk back that direction, and y'all made that walk a couple of times, how are you going to get back up to where dinner's being served?
All up the driveway.
You're going up the driveway. All right. This is where kind of some people get a little wary with this, but you have to think from a violent mentality. And I don't think from a violent mentality because I want to have to shoot somebody. I do it because I don't want to have to shoot somebody. But if you look back at, like, the World War I movies, and they're stringing up the Constantino wire, they string it up, just right out in front, right? Not usually. What they would do is if your line is over here and the bad guys are over here, they would string the Constantino wire up like this with openings. Seems pretty stupid, right?
Not if you want to follow.
Not if you want to bottleneck, because guess what? There's a machine gun right there. And there's a machine gun right there. And somewhere back here is a bunch of howitzers. That machine gun's pointed right there. And that machine gun's pointed right there. And that spot is prearranged for the howitzers. So when you try to come in here, you end up what we would call in the military in the kill zone. Because everything is pointed right there. So all of this is doing is obstructing you to channel you into where I want you to go. So when I showed up at Nicole's property for the first time and I was walking around, I was just like, oh, that's kind of convenient. I didn't think about it, from a really planning, like I'm going to do anything. But when I looked, I've got fence, pig pasture, bees, and then on the other side it's fence, pond, rocks, and more fence. It's like everybody's got to come up right there. And then from a concealment standpoint, there's a rag or something. To kind of roll some of this together, and we can actually look at this when we go back over there. The road is right here, and you got her driveway that comes up and around, and then there's this wash over here. Now, I'm sure actually I know some of y'all have already done it because I saw you walk it, and some of y'all are parked over here. But when you drive down this road, you can obviously see her driveway where the mailboxes are here. But a lot of people, if they're showing up to deliver or something, will end up at the wash and they sit there really confused because you can't see where the driveway connects on the back side. So that works towards concealment. I don't know if any of y'all figured this out, but there's the gate going over to Nighthawk's property. And when you're walking back from base camp over here, coming down the road, there's a fence over here. And there's a section of the fence where there's just one string of barbed wire. You can't really tell by looking at it, but there is a path that goes up and through that gate. But you can't see it from the road. But from a standpoint of security, you have her house right here. You have the cabin that I'm in right there. My access points for the property are here, here, and here. And I can put one person here, one person here. Both can shoot in this direction. We can both shoot in this direction, and we can both shoot in that direction. So that's kind of wrapping all of this together. Now, when we actually finish with the hard fencing, we're going to go back in and we're going to be planting stuff like Osage orange and some wild roses and stuff to make living fences, and just to have like the wild roses will weave through that woven wire fence or the welded wire fence and use it as a trellis. So it will go back to having that concealment aspect. It's also going to act as a deterrent, and it's acting as a funnel. Now, we can take that a step further. Let's talk about that at your house. What do most people have in front of their house?
Bushes.
Bushes. Driveway. Right up against the house, you're going to have a flower bed. For most people, that's like apparently the normal thing to do. I'm not very normal, but most people on their house, they're going to have a nice little flower bed and a little front porch adjacent to their front door. Well, if you're going to plant bushes there, if you've got a window right here, why would you plant your bushes there and there? Where are you funneling people?
To the window.
To your window. Put your bush in front of the window. And you got a nice little sidewalk here that comes out to your driveway. You could even put in a flower bed with lots of pretty roses all the way along the edge of that sidewalk, because what are you doing? You're channeling people straight to the front door. What do most people have adjacent to their front door? Really bright lights.
Oh, I was gonna say shotgun.
That's behind the door, JR. Okay, let's transition to inside the house.
On that note.
Baseball bat.
Inside.
Oh, we'll get to that part in just a second. So, my house, you've got a wall there, you got a wall like that. There's a door here, and there's a door here. You come in this door, there's a bunch of stuff. There's a wardrobe, there's a bunch of foot lockers. This wall is completely locked. There's a couch right there. There's a window right here, really big window. You could throw a brick through it. Doesn't make a very good access point because just on this side of that window is a very large indoor aquaponics system, which includes a 55-gallon aquarium and a table made out of 2x4 and 2x12s that stands about this tall. From this door, you've got a desk with a chair and a bunch of storage containers sitting around it. So if you come in this door with the intent to do something I don't want you to do, you got one choice. You can come right here and go that way. If you come in this door, you can come in around all this stuff and you end up right there. Same spot. Well, my bed is right there. Bedroom door is right there. Dog is right there facing the door. So if you try to come through the door, the dog's probably going to bite you in the balls. Where I'm laying right here, within arm's reach, I have a loaded AR, a second loaded AR, and a 45 with 2 mags. And the only thing separating me from you is 2 layers of sheetrock. And I know that you're going to end up standing right there, so I don't even have to get out of bed to shoot you. And that's if the dog doesn't get to you first. So once again, oh, by the way, there's another big window right there, but there's a kitchen counter and a bunch of mason jars full of like tea and salt and vinegar and stuff like that there too. So everything about trying to access here to get to where anything valuable might be, you've got an obstacle course to get there. Because, oh, by the way, when I'm laying out like aquaponic systems and stuff like that, a lot of times, just to save myself some time, I'll do it at night because it's dark and I can't do anything else. So guess where I lay it out? On my living room floor. So everything about this setup, I'm controlling your access and I'm putting obstacles in your way. And oh, by the way, the valuable there is some stuff of value in there, but the really valuable stuff that I have that any of y'all could steal right now, it's not in that building. So if you wanted to steal it, your first problem is you don't know where it is. It's here, but it ain't there. So everything about all of this starts with concealment and then deterring and then going into controlling your access and channeling people where you want them to go. And that makes people really uncomfortable. The guy that wants to break, most people that are looking to break in and steal something, they're relying on stealth. They don't want to be seen. They don't want to be heard. So when the only way that they can get somewhere is through the front door that's lit up like some kind of a, country music stage, they don't want to go there. And I mean, it's kind of the same deal, if the neighbor's house is just, front door wide open, he's got the garage door open with his nice shiny boat and 4-wheeler and everything sitting in the driver so he can show off to the neighbors, and they hit his house instead of mine. I mean, I've got food stored. If you don't have food stored, it sucks for you. I'm not going to go hungry. You can't tell by looking at me, but I really like to eat. So, it really is just kind of a thing of sitting down and taking it step by step of making sure that you don't have something that's visible and obvious that it's going to be a target for somebody that wants to do something nefarious, then putting obstacles in the way and then channeling that access. And also another thing with that too is another advantage, you city people actually have an advantage with this because obviously if you're in one of these like HOA hells or something similar to, even if it's not an HOA, your neighbors are probably going to get really irritated if you start putting up barbed wire. So putting rose bushes in instead not only keeps the neighbors happy, but also if anything ever was to happen and it goes to court, because you've all heard about the guy that tried to break in, fell through the skylight, broke his leg, and sued. Well, I mean, if you cut yourself on my fence, well, I didn't put that fence there to hurt anybody. I just put in a bunch of rose bushes because they look pretty. A little bit harder to sue me for that. Plus, you also have the added concealment that people don't associate in their brains rose bushes with security. And there's a lot of different stuff that you can do like that. There's various different bushes and shrubs that might even be a tree that has thorns, but you cut it off and it turns into a shrub and puts out really big thorns. So that's kind of another aspect of it. And then, of course, one other thing I will hit, because I got this question when I did this the first time at Self-Reliance about dogs. And it is a very important piece to me. And I get the question a lot too about predator protection for livestock. And everybody that I know that gets that question, the answer is very quick to come, and it consists of one word: dogs. Because you take something like my 45-pound blue heeler feist mix versus a 5-pound possum. Possum's gonna last about 10 seconds before my dog picks it up and goes into that dog death head shake. Hopefully the possum can crawl into a hole, but that's not necessarily a guarantee. I can show you the board on one of the composting outhouses that my dog broke in half so that it could crawl under the outhouse and get the possum that was hiding in there. But going back to the people that want to be stealthy about what they're doing when they're stealing, it doesn't really matter if your dog is one of those little 5-pound dogs that looks like a little dog stuffed animal. Those dogs are really good about being now your element of surprise is completely gone. If nothing else, I know you're there. And oh, by the way, the little yippy dogs are more inclined to bite. If you weren't aware of that fact. So, I mean, both for livestock and for your home, people don't like dogs because unlike, I can intimidate you. Even if I can intimidate JR. JR is twice my size, but I know how to push his buttons. I could intimidate him to back down from a fight if I really had to. You're not going to do that with a dog. And people know that. If it's the dog's house and you come in, you can't sit the dog down and have a conversation and explain to it that you're supposed to be there. Like, the dog doesn't know you, the dog doesn't like you, and you need to leave as far as the dog's concerned. So dogs is a very crucial part of that as well. So we will take, because the next phase of this evening is back over there, so we can walk back and I can discuss some of it on the way back over there. But before we do that part, I want to open up for any questions.
What do you think about pine trees for perimeter?
It depends on how you utilize them, but you could use pine trees, yes. I mean, pine trees are a pioneer species. So I was just at my parents' house back in March, and we went out to some family land, and there's some areas of that land where there's a bunch of pine and a bunch of privet trying to turn this field back into a forest. And the pine trees, when they're smaller, grow really dense. So it definitely makes a good visual barrier. And if it's really thick, you don't really want to walk through it when they're smaller. But as they get bigger, I don't really see it being that much of a deterrent. I would probably be more inclined to use that as something that's going to grow fast and quickly to get something up, and then come behind it and plant something else that would work a little more functionally for that purpose.
Yeah, I was just thinking dual purpose of noise barrier as well.
Yeah, and that would also be a thing as well.
I know I'm asking something personal, but I'm feeling SOL on the external part. We are on a highly visible 40-acre pasture that goes uphill, and our house is right there in the middle, on top of the hill, that can be seen all the way around. What would you begin to do with very few trees because it was bulldozed?
I would start with, I mean, obviously, are you still using it for pasture?
Yeah, I mean, it's
So-
a bunch of land that we haven't done anything with yet.
I mean, if you have, just say your house is here and here's your field and the road's right there, plant your fence line with something, just say a willow that's going to grow really fast, and you can plant them really densely. Just to get
You're in
some
Oklahoma, right?
Yeah,
Eastern red cedar.
eastern
we've
red
got
cedar.
some cedar, like what the the shitbirds that do.
But it's an
But it's
evergreen,
up the, but I'm on top of the hill, and so
but the road's down below.
The
and
road's
most
down
people
below,
are in
yeah.
their vehicle at that height level and able to look. You do eastern red cedar, it's gonna grow there in
Yeah.
Oklahoma. I mean, it can take over pastures and go crazy, but
Yeah.
if you plant it like that, your soil is probably already like, hey, yay, this is where I live, it's good.
Yeah.
And it's an evergreen, so
Yeah.
it'll give you good concealment.
So you can start with something like that along your roadside, but then, just like permaculture, the problem is the solution. You have a house in the middle of a field. That's a long way to go.
Except on the east side of me, and just a few yards, there's a whole kind of a neighborhood behind me. There's just a few houses there.
But use the open space to your advantage, and you put, one of the little use a little motion detector light pointed in each direction, so that if somebody comes up there, they're lit up, their concealment's gone.
Okay.
That's when you can get into your thorny stuff that black locust will grow there too. It'll poke holes, tires in your lawn equipment and all that, but if you manage it. And
That
it's
is the one tree that's growing on that property is locust.
I guarantee you,
Yeah.
yeah.
I do
But
have a
it'll
comment.
get thick enough that it'll be a visual barrier, but people won't want to go through it if it's a thicket. They
Yeah.
won't want to come through that way.
I have a comment that might help too. Like my house, my house is up on a hill and I have a long driveway, so I have the little driveway monitor alarm thing, and it has like 4 channels. So I have it kind of placed around my house in a couple spots. But if somebody walks up my driveway, the mailman or whatever, my two, plays music, and my 2, 8-pound pit bulls start barking like crazy.
Yeah.
So that's something that you could use, whether you use dogs or whether you have dogs or not. But
I do have dogs.
right. So they'll pretty quickly they'll associate the sound of that music with a visitor such as a UPS man or whatever.
Okay.
So that's something that could help too. At least you have monitoring. If something comes across there, be it an animal or a person or car or whatever, at least you'll know.
Yeah, if you've got a long space to cover with an elevated position behind it, that's probably not where people are gonna come in. They're gonna come in from that fence line that's close where the neighborhood side
behind
is.
it, yeah.
That's the part you need to focus
Put a
on.
little post with one of these solar, solar alarm sensor things.
Yeah.
And it covers 50 yards or so. put a few of those in different areas. If something walks by it, play music. And, like mine, I have, like 6 of them that have different music for each one. So I know if something's, if it plays like, it plays Nutcracker if it's over here, or, this other song, and I know it's over here by my kayaks.
Yeah.
So.
Swan Lake.
Okay, that gives me something to think about. Appreciate it, guys.
A suggestion, something that we tried, we used to live out in a little different rural area, and we lived in a mobile home, and there were a lot of break-ins in that little area. And people also threw their junk out of their vehicles on the road, and there was an old refrigerator dropped off. So we stood it up next to our driveway. I planted a silhouette there and put a bunch of holes in it. Things got real quiet in our neighborhood. Right on the side of the road, people saw that.
Yeah, line up a bunch of like distance markers.
Yeah, 'cause I have to admit, I don't have too much trouble, but as I'm trying to expand how much food I'm growing there, it does entail a lot of animals with electric net fencing. If things get as tough as what I could anticipate, I don't want people coming up there and stealing one of my pigs or a turkey or something like that.
They're not gonna steal a pig. I can tell you that right now. This lady pig got out a couple of days ago, and it took me and somebody else about 20 minutes to get her back into her fenced-in area where she knows and belongs. So I'm not gonna say somebody wouldn't try to steal a pig, but I love to just let me know you're gonna try that.
Yeah.
So I can set a camera up and live stream it and see if I can find a way to monetize that.
Also, another thing you really should consider is before you start doing significant defense work is find out what your threat is. If your threat is not significant from vehicle issues, then don't put stuff in that's gonna delay vehicles. It's just wasting money. If it's people, then look for stuff that's gonna prevent people. You wanna figure out what your biggest priority is and plan against that first and going down. Otherwise, you're just throwing money away.
Yeah.
So if you look, like, for example, if you live in the middle of Oklahoma and your next door neighbor's got 1,000 acres and one on the other side's got 1,500 acres, it doesn't make sense to spend a lot of time defending against the casual passerby on your highway that you get one car every 3 days. That's just wasting money. In that case, you want to build your defense inward towards your actual domicile.
And that goes back to knowing what happens in your area. Our area here with people breaking into barns, guess where all of my really nice expensive DeWalt tools are not? In the workshop. They're in the side room inside of my house.
Yeah, and you were talking about window deterrents and stuff, and we are in a mobile home and it's on a hill, so like on my end, it's way high. On the end that my granddaughter lives, it's the lowest point. It's got bay windows there. And I'm thinking, I think I can plant blackberries and roses on that end.
Yep.
And it not only keeps people out, but it will probably keep her in.
And it's
But
food.
one thing to think about with that though is you may not want to obstruct the window itself.
True.
Because on one hand, that's a fire exit in case there's another way out. And another, if you do have a problem, you want people to be able to see in, not be obstructed behind a wall of something. So like you don't want your blackberries to come up and cover that window, because then if people can get behind it, nobody's gonna know they're there.
Yeah.
So it's just something to consider.
Yeah, I could think that could work on that
And with
too.
it being a mobile home, there might be the underside of that bay might be damageable by a bush.
Oh, yeah.
Might be plastic.
We've got a spot, we're not occupying yet, but if I want to start storing some stuff out there, how safe and secure is a container?
Horrible.
Oh, really?
It's safe to
Yeah,
have
well,
battery.
yeah.
Or a battery powered angle grinder.
I have something important, and all I need to get to it is an angle grinder that's battery powered. Give me about 1 to 2 minutes and I'll have that thing open.
Yeah.
Don't even need
Buy
that.
the biggest, most badass secure lock you possibly can. I'm not even gonna touch it.
Right.
All I gotta do is cut the bar.
Yeah.
And I can hatch that thing open. And if you block the door with a bulldozer, I can hack right through the side of it with an angle grinder.
It's
Very,
safe
very
and secure
thin.
from water and rodents,
Yeah,
but not two-legged,
Rats.
that goes straight back to
Especially
the
if they're-
concealment part.
especially if they're unsupervised, people aren't out there much and freaking meth heads that need money because
People buy
Everything's not going
containers
so
to
well.
store shit in.
So,
People buy containers to store shit in that they're not gonna touch for a while, so people think that if they hatch open a storage container, steal the stuff out of it, it's probably gonna be a while before you even notice.
Yeah.
So I would be more inclined to go with something that looks like it wouldn't have something in it, whether it's like a little camper trailer that you gutted the inside of. I would rather put my stuff in something like that than a storage container, because people that are going to be looking to steal something usually have the tools with them. So
I
Craigslist,
do know one
you
truck
have
buried a
toolboxes?
refrigerator and had a padlock for it, so it was level with the ground, and he sort of stuff in that, and you couldn't see it. You know, he just threw some like pallets over the top of it, you had no idea it was even there.
yeah,
For the $3 to $5 grand for your storage container, you could buy a pretty nice trailer, just keep it at home, have the stuff ready to go and roll out with it when you need it.
yeah.
And,
But I was saying about truck toolboxes, look on Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace or whatever, like that's a good one to keep water and rodents out of. But they're small. So depending on how big your property is, like if you have a few things that you do want to keep out there and you don't want to cart back and forth, that would be a smaller storage container that you probably could conceal, nobody would run into. Game cams are cheap. So one of the questions you want to know is, are there people coming across this property when I'm gone?
The property does have a lot of junk, so if we just left it there.
No one would know.
Brilliant to conceal.
That's concealment. Right?
Yeah, but those truck toolboxes, a lot of people get rid of them. They're easy to seal back up if you wanted to do silicone around them and keep ants and rodents and insects and stuff out of them.
Any other questions? All right. Well,
Actually, I want to share one story with y'all. This is like real life story. So we talk about my name's JR, by the way, if I haven't met you directly. We're going to use lethal force on someone. I want to share a real life story. One of my troops, her and her hubby bought a house, and a year and a half had gone by. Something goes bump in the night. She's like, Tyler, get out of bed. There's somebody in the house. No, there's not. Yes, there is. No, there's not. Okay, I'll go check. He grabs a shotgun, goes into the kitchen. House is dark, but the refrigerator light is now open and flooding into the house. And the heart rate is like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Somebody's in. They don't have kids at this point. Nobody's supposed to be in this house. So he levels the shotgun down. The refrigerator door shuts, and there's a man standing there that he does not recognize in his house. Never seen this person in their life. And then there's a standoff, and the milk gets dropped, or the beer, whatever it was, gets dropped to the floor, and it's like, who are you? Who are you? Like this back and forth. Like that dude was like, I'm supposed to be here. Who the hell are you? And he's like, this is my house. I'm supposed to be here. And there was a standoff. He didn't have to ask questions. It's Oklahoma. He could have just assumed and solved the problem with the shotgun right there. He didn't. Previous homeowner had an estranged son that was like 28, 29, 30 years old.
Never changed the locks.
Never changed the lock. Still had a key to the house. He came home to see dad.
First thing I did when I bought our house was change those locks.
So he could have smoked him right there in the kitchen. And then you're having to deal with all that stuff. Depending on your state laws, whether you have to retreat and all this, wherever you live, that can, and plus it's going to stain your dang kitchen floor. Servro is going to have to come out, and that's going to cost, you have to make an insurance. Like, it just gets rough from there. Like, you may have been in the right, but there's a lot of fallout that comes from that, even if you're not convicted of anything. So along with going that route, like, there's even more layers to it. But I just want to share that story with you guys as you're thinking about, if you're him and you're thinking to yourself as you're racking around in the shotgun going, happy birthday to me. This is going to be great. This is what I've been waiting for.
Tactical, there's a question for you. Do you do security consults in Middle Tennessee?
I have not done a security consult for anybody, but if they have social credit, they would know how to get a hold of me and we can have that conversation.
There we go.
All right, well, if we don't have any other questions, we can go on and start migrating, and I'll run my mouth the whole way back.